So we face quite a large subject here today, and we're talking, or perhaps reminding people, about the nature of duality, because it is in duality in which we live in this third dimension of matter here on planet Earth at this time. At least that is the perception for the vast majority of people. And within duality we know very well that we have the opposites. We have male, female, light, dark, positive, negative, good, bad, all the judgments. Everything else comes into that process, and we learn by reflection. We grow and develop through the mirror reflections that this dualistic process affords us. So that's the first thing that we have to understand. And within that, of course, and I know Shakespeare talked about life just being a stage with actors playing on the stage. The whole fantastic kind of programming of life unfolds within this dynamic of duality. So we have a very fascinating play, which is really all that life is, unfolding in front of our eyes, moment by moment, day by day. And it's as though we need to sit in the theatre stalls and watch the play on the stage. It's a matter of detachment sometimes. We very often find ourselves too involved in life. We grab life by the throat, and we have great difficulty in seeing the wood for the trees. The solution very often is to stand back from the drama, stand back and get the overall picture. The role of the observer, we might call it, to stand back and see how the play is actually unfolding. And when we do that, of course, it's a very good play, as I said. We have all our wonderful positive angelic forces and lovely little light beings, and people who are all very much into the new age and trying to improve themselves and trying to be ever so nice and delightful and charming and cooperative and loving to each other. And what a lot of those people deny is that there is a shadow within duality. And that shadow, of course, is operating on the stage of life. And that shadow basically is control and fear. That's really what is being worked out. Now, vibrationally, of course, there's a very large difference between these two particular manifestations. And I've worked quite a bit with the knowledge of Dr. David Hawkins, who has invented, I think, a brilliant test for measuring consciousness, which is done through kinesiology, which is muscle testing. And in that process, he has created a scale which goes from 0 to 0, from 0 to 1,000, and 1,000 being the highest energy that any physical human being can manifest without breaking the nervous system. And so the great beings like Jesus Christ, like Buddha, all the great teachers, of course, measure at the very top level of the scale. And these are beings who have moved beyond duality. They have moved into unity consciousness, Christ consciousness, oneness, as their manifestation on earth. These are people who observe life, who know that life is a program running through them. And the vibrational level of those great sages, we have currently people like Mother Meera, Ammachi, all sorts of Indian sages and saints as well among us, who all manifest that very, very high frequency. Anybody coming into contact with them can sense that vibration, that really powerful healing vibration as well, the vibration of oneness. So that's the extreme in our dimension at the moment of beyond duality. But within duality itself, we have also the question of what we call the dark, the shadow, those that are here to control. And without the interplay of opposites, we evidently don't come through to the next stage. So it's the balance in life, the middle way, as the Buddha called it, that we integrate the positive, the negative, the light, dark, the male, female, and so on, and we integrate it all within ourselves. So being played out there on the stage of life, and we are at this moment really witnessing it, if only people could open their eyes to see it beyond denial. There is no question that over, in the last 200 years or so, that a group has arisen. They call themselves Illuminati, those who have understood a lot of what I'm talking about now and have decided to use it, or the blueprint is that they've decided to use it to enslave and to control and entirely manipulate and brainwash humanity so that they are ultimately the conquerors, and I don't know what their end game is, where they intend to go with all the with their ill-gotten gains or piles of gold or whatever it is they ultimately claim when everything else is brought down. That I really don't know. I don't know where they're leading, but there is no question that at the moment that the bankers are in league with the politicians, are in league with the large corporations in this world, and the media in particular, and basically they have a stranglehold. And it is that force that we name the Illuminati, and who are definitely, in terms of the average person, entirely control the unfolding of life as we know it here at this time. It's very subtly done. Of course, the people who are involved in this are themselves excellent liars. We've seen with politicians who are known for that ability, but in recent years, without mentioning names, but certainly in Britain and America, where these forces are in close alliance, we have seen blatant lying, absolutely non-stop. And as the Nazis knew very well, if you tell a big enough lie often enough and loud enough, people will believe it. And the difficulties with the human race is that they are so disconnected from themselves that they are not capable of accessing their own inner knowledge, their own inner knowing. They are still projected out into belief and belief systems, which are a second-hand experience of other people's ideas. And time and again we have this phenomenon going on. You tell a big lie and advertise it on television and on media right across the board, and write all sorts of things to support it and say that it's scientifically backed and so-and-so Nobel Peace Laureate backs this and everything else. But people don't understand it's against a background of a total conspiracy. And so they are easily misled. And of course the Illuminati and those entities that have, I suppose, programmed it, and I feel that it's so clever and so smart, the program, and I've often, I do a lot of research into it, I feel it must be an off-planet influence, a sort of ET influence, because frankly it's a lot smarter than 99.9% of the human race, of that there's no doubt. I'm in great admiration of it in many ways for its sheer cleverness, but it relies entirely on the vulnerability, the susceptibility of really not very evolved, but basically decent human beings who are inclined to be loving and trusting, but not very discerning. And that's what they've taken advantage of to the full, and used it and exploited it. I have a feeling, although I haven't got too much evidence for it, it's a sort of an inner knowing that the as I said just now, the dastardly cleverness of the plot, when you really begin to get into it and see how easy it is to mislead large numbers of people, that, as I said, it seems to be of a level of intelligence that is generally beyond human. It's just a feeling. Now, where it comes from, where it's brought in, I really don't know. I have to personally take it right back to the great confusion about certainly the Christian religion and the three religions essentially that are based on Jehovah worship, which is certainly Christianity and Judaism. And a lot of people are still stuck in their definition of God in those traditions. They're stuck in the belief that God is this character Jehovah. Everybody must be reminded that it is stated in the Bible itself that this is a jealous, judgmental God. This is not a God of love. And when you see the results of people who believe in that demigod, some people call it a satanic demigod, and you see their actions on earth, which are grim to say the least, which are totally unloving and all about control. The Christian religion itself, after all, 1700 years of it, it was created in Rome, of course, in the third century AD, nothing to do with what Jesus Christ brought at all. But from then onwards, from the 3rd century AD, we have to measure Christianity in the rivers of blood that it has unleashed. That's its legacy. And it's simply horrific. And we have to look at Judaism as well. We have to look at how that religion can justify sitting in a place called Palestine and treating the indigenous people, who happen to be Semitic, which a lot of the Jews who are in Palestine for various reasons, which I won't go into at the moment, don't have as much claim to the land as the original Palestinians themselves, who are ancient Semitic peoples whose families have not moved for several hundred years from that area. And I've met these people myself. I've worked with them on the Mount of Olives and many other places. That these people who are Jehovah worshippers are content to believe that they have a right to the land and to inflict the most indescribable horror on the indigenous population. Gaza is now the largest concentration camp the world has ever witnessed, ever known. Is it blaring in our newspaper headlines every day? Are the details being given to us? No. The press and the media are entirely controlled. You get an occasional side article. You get a lot on the internet, of course, which gives us a great deal of truth. But this is what I'm talking about in the terms of the Illuminati. You have a complete block on the control of information that is fed out. We have just now, actually today, two of the largest swindles that this planet has ever known. Two Zionist Jews in New York and Florida, one Mr. Rubin and one Mr. Madoff. I think their combined swindling of clients is something in the order of $200 billion. That has just emerged and broken the day before we have this interview. Is that headlines in our Sunday papers today? No, it is not. This gives you very clear and perfect examples of the level of control that are going on this planet and the real dramas going on behind the scenes. But what I keep coming back to is that it is duality unfolding. It is all part of the greater plan. Now, we have to get people to take quite a leap in faith and in an expansion in consciousness to be able to accept that God is all is God. Because that is the truth within oneness, and we are one. And all the great teachers have said so. So everything that manifests on this planet, including what we've just talked about, is part of the grand design. With all the cruelty and all the horror that's involved in it, and all the love and all the compassion and everything else that emerges from it. Because out of the horrors, and I've been often in Palestine and Israel, and although people see nothing but negativity on the media and everything else, I've seen incredible beauty and great wonders emerging, because that's what happens in these places. So all the time in this interaction of duality comes all kinds of ripples and consequences. So a great plan is being unfolded. No doubt it has to do with karma, with previous times of incarnations on the planet, one nation against another, the whole process energetically being balanced out. I don't know. I can't give an answer to that, because we in these limited bodies with limited human intellect have not got the grand overview of the great plan, of the great designer that is the divine, that is God. Not some demigod, some great intelligence that encompasses all there is. So this drama is unfolding here on this planet. It's come to a particular peak because, as many of the prophecies have talked about, and this is an area of agreement which is unusual amongst humanity, but a vast number of the shamanic pagan groupings of people agree, the Hopis, the Mayans, and a great many others that I've travelled and talked to around the world, that we are at a point where something very dramatic is going to change on this planet. In the Christian Western tradition, we call it last days, end times, and of course it's misinterpreted as being the destruction of the planet. I don't feel that's going to happen, and I don't talk about that or advocate it in that way. What I talk about is that it is the end of the old institutions and the old ways, and that this planet moves forward from a rather low frequency into a much higher frequency, as it, in fact, and the rest of the planets in our solar system, which is called the Sagittarius dwarf elliptical galaxy, if anyone didn't know, begin to join the much more powerful Milky Way galaxy. We are currently spiralling into an outer arm of the Milky Way galaxy. We're coming in on an angle, we're not on the same plane, and all scientists and astronomers have noticed that fact. We are being drawn in, so this great galaxy is now devouring us. Won't be tomorrow, won't be, next week, but over a period, of course, this is gradually and inexorably happening. And it was foreseen by those that had expanded consciousness, that were able to go within in order to understand the greater mysteries, that there would be a time when we went beyond literally time and space, and that everything on this planet would alter. And that is my understanding of the times we're coming to in 2012, but it is gathering pace now. And it is like a final desperate struggle between these energies that I talked about, ranging at very high levels, the love and the beauty, the sharing, the cooperation, the whole ideal of the Aquarian age, pitched against the very end of the old Piscean hierarchical, dominating, controlling and fearful energies. And as one is heightened, which it is at the moment, so is the other. And the difficulty we have here with completely controlled media is that we're not being given the great beauty and light that is emerging. There are a few attempts on internet, on papers like Positive News and people who write positively about these things, that there is a representation, but it's nothing like as large as the control of the controlled media that feeds us all negativity all the time and creates these immense dramas. We have the collapse of the world financial system going on at the moment. As Lord Dennis Healey said, a former Chancellor in England, nothing financial happens by chance, it's all planned. And it's most important to understand that. So there have been those behind the scenes, and these are the days when we talk about the 12 families. It's actually part of prophecy. The system that we have of usury and fractional reserve banking always ensures that a tiny portion of humanity suck in the wealth of the rest. That's how the system is loaded, that's how it works. And in our days now, there are a few families of the Zionist Illuminati fringe in particular, talk about Rothschilds, Rockefellers and so on, well known, who do actually control the vast, vast portion of wealth on this planet right now. And that's the point that we've reached. So it's like a gargantuan final, the last act of the play that we talked about on the stage when I started. This is the finale, the last act, and the curtain is shortly to go down on that last act. And all the characters are on stage and must be on stage. These are characters who've been involved in the fall of Atlantis in previous times, those who have misapplied energies or applied energies in a selfish way. Let's not judge the whole thing, because judgment is not appropriate here. We're not pointing fingers we're just pointing that there is a drama going on and that there are actors with different roles in this drama. That takes us out of judgment, which is really important. It's said, after all, judge not, lest you be judged. It is the unfoldment of what is necessary at a universal level that is being unfolded on this planet now. And we are all actors in that process. So when we talk of Illuminati, when we talk of Zionist bankers, when we talk of controllers in general, these large corporations. We can talk of the medical world as well, which has certainly lost everything to do with any concept of healing and natural laws. It is entirely about forceful injections and inoculations, knocking out the immune system of the human being and everything else. But all this is part of the grand design. And if we can see it from that perspective, and it's asking quite a lot because most people are still fully into judgment, and many in the New Age who think they've come into awareness are as judgmental as anybody else, and finger pointing in all directions. And it's what we've been trained to do. We've been brainwashed into that in duality. And yet if we can stretch ourselves a little beyond that and see that this is the grand finale of the final clash, in a sense, of duality within this third dimensional experience here on planet Earth, in preparation for the next stage. And that next stage, I think, may well be parallel realities. It could be parallel universes. I'm talking here again of that scale of consciousness where up at 1,000 and down at the very, very lower level of total control and fear and hatred and negativity and bloodletting and torture, these are diametrically contrasting energies. And in the new frequency coming, in this new area of space that we're going into, in the bombardment of vibrations coming from the Milky Way galaxy, the understanding I and other people have is that there will actually be a splitting. It's what's called in the Revelations a sorting of the wheat from the chaff, which is not a judgment. It's about a vibration entering and naturally separating into quite logically and quite easily sort of flowing different frequencies. Because within unity we have diversity, and diversity within unity. All is one, yes, but there are different frequencies within that oneness. And just as there are beings in this room now that you and I can't see with our physical eyes, they do exist. There is a realm, there is a plane of existence. So within what I see as the human race, 6.5 billion human beings, there will be a splitting there of a certain portion that are destined to move into a different frequency without losing their bodies, just in refined vibrations. We're looking, after all, at the next stage. It may not again be tomorrow, but we're looking at breatharianism. I've met quite a few breatharians who take neither food nor water for several weeks, several months. We're looking at androgyny, moving away from the separation of male and female. We're looking at psychic communication beyond language. Language, of course, separates. I'm talking like crazy now. Anybody listening to this will come up with different conclusions, quite different from what I'm intending, from what I'm saying. So words divide. We get beyond words. We get into the psychic connection where we can see the truth in people and just perceive it, just as a pane of glass. There'll be no deception anymore. So all these, and we'll be coming into much, much lighter physical bodies. The Aquarian, after all, is air-based, not water-based, and we shall all be, it will look in, say, 200-300 years completely different from what it is now, particularly in the level that I'm talking about of this parallel reality, which raises into, let's call it ascension. It's a much misused word, but we can use it nonetheless. An ascension process of consciousness where the physical manifestation will look very different to what it is now.
Can I just ask something? Talking about this grand design, for people who don't really, are very new to this area, to them, they would wonder why would a God allow something like this to happen? So that's what I'm asking you. Yes.
Well, of course, it is the great and complicated question that comes in. And we have approached it in a way by talking about a demigod called Jehovah, a jealous and judgmental God who wishes to control and who has, in that sense, overlighted, well, maybe lighting is the wrong word, but has dominated that sphere of activity in a large portion of human behaviour, which is precisely the cruelty, that you're referring to with the question. And that is, again, for me, a very good reason to question why people should believe in that particular deity. So even in terms of the Christian religion and Judaism and Islam and so on, those that believe in this Jehovah deity, what evidence, what proof is there that this is a loving God? Because it most certainly isn't in any history or any terms that we've got. Now, that's the third dimensional dualistic approach. We move then, and this is a big ask for a lot of people, because again in David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, and he works through a lot of very interesting questions with kinesiology, and kinesiology bypasses the brain altogether. It's muscle testing that is straight truth. It's the most incredible process. And one of his questions was, and he tested this with several hundred people and working in pairs, is about the levels of consciousness on the planet, and this was done in the mid-90s. And at that time, 1 in 10 million people was interested remotely in the idea of enlightenment or self-realization. I'm talking way beyond religions now. I'm talking into a tiny portion. It's a little bit like the capstone of a pyramid, which is necessarily small, but it's a critical mass of people, because the vibration I'm talking about, the energy of these people, is exponential. It's extremely powerful. So that capstone on the pyramid of humanity is actually what holds the whole of what otherwise would dissolve into terrible fear and negativity, holds it in place. So we're talking of a tiny portion, but since the mid-90s we've been bombarded with so many new frequencies and energies, and the incarnation of so many wonderful, not new souls, very, very old souls, but all sorts of crystal, different rayed children, that there are so many different names. Indigos. Now there's a wonderful incarnation last year of the children of the sun, they're being called. Only 3 of them born so far, the first in China in June last year. And this child will not fall into duality at all, and will not even language. She will project in geometric consciousness communication. 3 of these children are now on the planet. So what you are beginning to see is that not that we oldies are going to go through this fantastic transformation. We've been holding the energy, as it were. But the new incarnations that will not need to go into the depths of the duality that we were talking about. It's as though we arrive, we are born, of course, in unity consciousness, perfect divine beings born in unity consciousness, and not until age 2 that the ego comes knocking on the door. So those babies are in unified consciousness. It's from 2 onwards, the terrible 2s, that the ego sets in. And that's actually when our first separation arrives, and we are on a search from that moment. We're searching for something because our innate oneness has actually been separated, and we sense that. And then we wonder, with our egos and our intellects working, where is it, where is it, where is it? I must search, I must look, I must look, I must look. Of course, not immediately. You'll go through education and you're early, there's enough on this planet to keep you occupied for a long time. But in about the mid-30s to 40s, people start to think, well, is that all there is to it? Shopping at Tesco every Sunday and watching TV and a little bit of sex and a bit of, is that it? You know, and people begin to ask, it's not enough. And then they begin to search. And then this searching goes on in all directions, because you're looking for actually what you'd overlooked, which is the oneness that is innate within you and has never, ever left you. So the paradox is actually that there is no search. And that would be quite alarming for most in the New Age movement and all the guru worshipping world of searching through books and techniques and journeys and pilgrimages and goodness knows what. It's a great entertainment, of course. We're all having a marvellous time, searching like mad. The search is led by the ego, and the intellect backs it up. They're the terrible twins, and they keep us fully occupied here in a separated state in the third dimension of duality. That's how it works. So our innate oneness, which is what we truly are, is the divine force. God is all is God. And it isn't projected onto some personification, as the Jehovah consciousness is, which many people would think is an old man with a grey beard sitting on a throne, in awful, I don't know how it's described in Christianity, the fear of God and the language they use of awful splendour and all this stuff, is a complete misconception when you move beyond that stage of what the divine, all-encompassing creative energy actually is. It is just oneness. And it is beyond judgments, it's beyond preferences, it's beyond organisation or control. It is simply isness and beingness and stillness. It is pure consciousness. They call it presence awareness. That's all it is. It's neutral. It has no preferences. And it is the energy behind the unfoldment on this planet of what happens moment by moment by moment. Life is a series of happenings. Actually, beyond planning at human level, if you've ever cared to look at your own life. Beyond your choices that you think you make. Yes, it appears we make plenty of choices every day, all day long. It appears we do. But actually, with very good readings, with things like Nadi palm leaf readings, which I've had in India, with very good psychic readings, we have a blueprint, actually, on this planet. And we will fulfill the destiny of that blueprint in every single detail, because that is our contribution to the play of life that's being enacted on the stage of life. And it's no good any single member butting out of that and saying, oh, I don't like this role, I think I'm going to cancel this and go off and, have a cup of coffee and do something different. Because the whole integrity of the play doesn't work if a single bit of it is missing. It's like a great jigsaw puzzle that unfolds. So everybody has their destined part within that process. So the great unfolding is the combination of all of that happening as it needs to. Now, I can't sit here and say, and wouldn't, because I don't even see that there is a separate me in this case. We're talking now pure non-duality. This is just an impersonal instrument, an impersonal vehicle that is worked through by the higher forces for whatever is required. So it's not an ego with ideas, it is simply a vehicle of expression, of manifestation. And where this comes from, where this sits, I would have no idea, no concept of the bigger agendas going on behind the universe. We could be perhaps just a teardrop in size, all of the known universe that you could see in terms of scale, in something infinitely larger. We could be no bigger than an ant that might be trodden on very shortly. In all the galaxies of hundreds of trillions of light years away. It's all a matter of scale. We simply don't know. So what we do know is, as observers, what unfolds moment by moment by moment, beyond judgment. We also know within that we are pure consciousness, temporarily limited in a physical form. But our true nature is pure consciousness. We are all one forever. And with a combination of that understanding, which actually is cellular, because the head is the wrong tool for this. This has to be felt. The words being spoken now have to be actually felt for their truth. You can't argue it. The head will always get in and say, ah, yes, but, well, why, oh, yes, and this is unfair, and that, and it keeps butting in, because the ego and the intellect are trying to preserve their own integrity and their independence. We're talking beyond them now. So when we can accept that we are pure consciousness expressing here, when we understand that all happens by divine will, as Jesus Christ said, thy will, not mine, be done. The Father and I are one. I mean, all these great teachers gave all the clues. When that is the case and you are surrendered, and this is probably the great word, when the ego is surrendered to the life process that is being lived through you, then there is a stillness and a peace, and they call that the peace of God that surpasses understanding. Why surpassing understanding? Because the brain and the head can't get it. It is the wrong tool. The tool is the heart. And the cellular structure, which is being programmed as in the biology of belief, forgotten the name of the author, wonderful, wonderful biologist who's broken all the norms in the study of biology. Bruce Lipton, exactly. He shows that each cell is absolutely independent, and the sheath around a cell is a brain, and it's being actually programmed by energies and forces from all around the universe. It doesn't need a head. They did an experiment in his book on some young guy who had quite a high IQ, and they had to open his head for some reason, and there was just cerebral fluid there. There wasn't any physical brain. So we really are beginning to be expanded out of that idea that we are somehow able to through our intelligence to know so much. I mean, we simply aren't. It's useful equipment for navigating this dualistic world of matter, yes, but we're talking now of a non-duality, of a surrender to a fixed plan of which we are the integral part of the divine. You see, when you look at this, there is no more than this moment. The divine is manifest right here now. Not as our egos and intellects would like to think, because we would think if the egos got hold of it, oh, well, there'd be flashing lights and there'd be this fantastic, being of this, that or the other. We've all got incredible imaginations about what the divine is. But actually, what is happening is it. There is no more godness than there is now. There is no more divinity than there is here in this moment. Everything is unfolding now as it has to be, precisely, moment by moment by moment. So the question of free choice and free will is one of the most complex, really, and most challenging in the teachings of what we're talking about, which is non-duality. Non-duality actually can't be taught. It's all that can be done is to point to certain understandings, because eventually the absorption of the whole vibration of non-duality will come through the heart and through sense and feeling and instinct and intuition. It won't come through the logic. So it can't be taught in that normal sense. But the difficulty that we have over the centuries is that the human race, we could say now, quite honestly, without being patronizing, is not that evolved. Certainly not in expanded consciousness or in awareness levels, and that's not anybody's fault. It's not a judgment. There are large numbers on this people, basically on this planet, who can barely afford to live and be here, so they have no time for exploring and expansion in that way. They're struggling to live. But when you go back to the time of the great teachings and the masters of Jesus Christ and the Buddha and whatever, they were working with extremely primitive people. And what is not widely understood, but I think some understand it, is that the teachings that were given which were by beings of the highest order, the teachings naturally had to be watered down so that there could be a comprehension among peoples living ordinary lives at that time. And to make sense of the dualistic world, it seems to be pretty obvious that all day long we are making choices, and in fact it's actually true that we're making choices. I can choose whether to pick up my glasses or touch this table or anything else. It appears to be my choice. The point of non-duality is that the whole of the life experience is seen as a multidimensional hologram where all is known. And this is the challenging part of expanding the consciousness to feel your way into this, so that we can look at it in terms of if there is only one, if there is only oneness, how can there be a separate entity or ego that chooses? That's one of the first questions that you have to ask yourself, because if there is only oneness, how can you then go into separation and make a choice? There's an understanding that there may well be a collective choice or collective will which embraces all of us, and maybe somewhere, somehow, there is an entity that is working and manipulating all of that. But in our world of oneness, which is now scientifically demonstrated through fractals, through holograms, whatever, that all is interconnected and interdependent, and we are actually one and just reflections of each other, how can there, in that world of oneness, can there be, in actual reality, a separated ego that thinks it chooses? That's one point. There are various others, because it's really quite an interesting subject, and you have to ask yourself all these things. Presumably, we don't choose negative thoughts and experiences. It's quite an interesting point. I mean, I had a major car smash, which I think probably woke me up back in the 70s. It was a pretty horrific thing. I came out of it intact, but not able to speak for 3 days. And we've all had examples in our lives where really horrific things do happen, terrible illnesses and all sorts of things. But have we chosen that at a conscious level here in this life? You may argue we've chosen it for our blueprint before the life, and I would probably agree with that. But that's all part of the fixed unfolding that I'm talking about. As we go through day by day, we generally try to save our skins, we try to make life as comfortable as possible, and we give ourselves credit all the time for all the good things that we've apparently chosen. But when something negative happens, oh, that's destiny. Isn't that funny how we play games with it? Well, let's stop playing the game, shall we? It's all part of the unfolding plan. The so-called positive and negative are all part of it. Do we choose our next thought? Look at the speed at which they rush through our heads. A thought runs through, it's not your thought, it's a bubble. It runs through, it takes about a second to pass through our consciousness, unless you grab it. If you grab it, you can play with it for a long time, and that's what we tend to do. Monkey mind, constantly engaged in all kinds of crazy thinking, which is all to do with past and future. In fact, we are obsessive thinkers. It's a horrible disease in actual fact. Nobody tells us we've got to think all the time. We can actually stop and be still and be in beingness and isness, rather than being vehicles that are constantly at the mercy of a mind that has revved out of control. So these thoughts pass through and we observe them and they pass on. There's no reason to disturb your state of consciousness in meditation or whatever else. You just allow it all to move on. We have a working mind which will function very well in this dimension, where we have to book an aeroplane ticket or we have to get some work done or whatever, and then the mind comes in and works very well for that. That's its purpose. But it has somehow got itself into the position of control together with the ego, and it spends all its time projected into future possibilities or past events, chewing over. It misses and is not comfortable in presence in the now moment. And that is the great focal point for non-duality, because all actually happens in the now, in the present. And there is an understanding that everything that has ever happened is exactly as it's meant to be, so we need never revisit the past. We need never blame ourselves or say, if only, or we could have, or we should have done this, or we ought to have, or what a pity, and all the the hand-wringing that people are worried about for most of their lives about things that have happened in the past. When we accept that everything happened for a purpose, exactly as it needed to, not as your ego judges, but as it needed to. And the so-called future, which is unfolding in now moments, will be as it will be. You may, as we said earlier on, if you meditate, and I ask people to do this quite often if they're thinking particularly of coming on a tour with me. I often have this problem. People say, oh, it'd be lovely to come on. I said, I don't want to hear that it'll be lovely to come on a tour with me. I would like to know from you, having meditated, Is this a pull for you? Can you feel your way down your blueprint to a point where you have some feeling inside that says, yes, that is for me, and then make your commitment, because we have that blueprint. That's our only link to a so-called future, because we have a destiny. There's no question that destiny will be fulfilled. But the space that we reach it from is the now moment, in presence, in isness, in beingness. We are human beings, not human doings. Doing comes out of being. So first of all, it's the being. So to go back onto the choice aspect. And if there were free choice and free will, why haven't we all chosen enlightenment? It's a good point, isn't it? I mean, this is the way. This is the way that life then becomes less stressful. That it fulfills itself. That aspect of you is non-attached, is the observer, is the silent witness. And that is certainly the way, as I've experienced myself, to live this complicated life. The full trust, the surrender, the knowing that you have incarnated by some divine will that is coming to its logical conclusion, whatever that may be. And it could be a whole variety of different things, but it is on its own unfolding agenda, moment by moment by moment, and we're simply observing and watching it. And there is no question that when this level of consciousness actually begins to click in, and it's not a mental thing, you can't study for it, you can't go on Monday morning and enroll for this, this is on your blueprint. There will be a moment of what we call self-realization or enlightenment, where you surrender, and you are not concerned or preoccupied anymore with the unraveling of the details of life. It will be as it will be. You may have money, you may not. You may meet somebody, you may not. It will unfold. And there's no point in stressing yourself about all the possibilities and the could-bes and the might-bes. There's no sense whatever. Most of the time people are revving their heads up and stressing themselves about things that never happen and have no reality levels at all. They're fantasies. And all that time could be spent in being peaceful with nature, being still within, knowing that all the wisdom is accessed not externally, but internally. The outside world and space is an illusion. Everything is actually at the speed of thought. And if you feel that one and think that through, it crushes everything down into now. Just your thought of the far side of the universe, hundreds of light years away or thousands of light years away, in a thought, you're there. Where are we half our lives? Asleep. In sleep, ego is not functioning. And we roam the entire range of consciousness. We are in our sleep, in that sense, surrendered in terms of ego, and we are one with all that is, roaming at incredible levels of consciousness. So half our life is already spent in this state, which is really quite an interesting fact. And the other point is really that it's so simple that the human mind finds it objectionable in its simplicity. We trip over it. In fact, we overlook everything that we're talking about now. We overlook the fact that we are, always have been, and always will be enlightened as beings. Yes, we had this apparent separation age too, when intellect and ego took over and took us on this merry search, which is great fun and keeps us occupied, and it's all fantastic entertainment. And in the end, it comes back for those that will become enlightened or self-realized, and it comes back to the fact that we have overlooked the simple fact of presence, that we are it anyway, always have been and always will be. And the reaction for many who finally get that great awakening is just to fall down on the floor in fits and fits of laughter. People can laugh for hours on end at the madness of it all and the utter simplicity of it all, that it is all one in this moment, here and now. And there is nothing else. Nothing gets better, nothing gets different, nothing changes. So in a very long way, in answering your original question, when it's set against that background of complete trust and surrender to a much, much, much more evolved program we could ever conceive of, we can't judge whether God wants this or wants that. We can only say that the divine is actually a neutral force, that is the cohesive force of all that we know, and that it works out as it needs to in this play of life. There's pain, there's pleasure, there's everything. It was obviously by some great mind somewhere invented as some kind of a workshop or vehicle or whatever. People say that the divine, which is neutral, has the opportunity to witness itself in action, as it were. This is consciousness in motion compared to consciousness at rest. Because when we move from an enlightened state beyond the wheel of karma, which is not the case in many people, we move into the ocean of consciousness, of non-individuation. There is no individuation there. Those who still continue in the dualistic concepts, and that's the vast, vast, vast majority of human beings, most in the New Age, plenty who still channel through to us from the other side, they remain in the astral planes on the wheel of karma, and they still give us information about dualistic teachings. And those dualistic teachings, which are the mainstay of New Age, are about your free choice, your willpower, your responsibility, your effort, your volition. And what do you think that does? It inflates ego to the level of a vast balloon. Cosmic ordering is the latest thing. Your intention setting. Well, intention setting is the greatest road to karma that I possibly know. It's absolutely inevitable. Who is to say that this or that intention is appropriate in any particular situation? You're asked simply to be. And by being, you are light. And that is your greatest contribution to this whole experiment here on this planet. To be light. On this map of consciousness that David Hawkins extrapolated, the most fascinating part of it was on the another scale he drew up, which was that as one moves through this scale of consciousness and comes, say, into the middle levels of 500 and 600, where you're in heart energy, you're in cooperation, in harmony, and obviously that expansion has started, just by your presence in the physical body, in that state of consciousness, you hold counterbalanced at level 500, 750,000 people who are in a negative, fearful frequency, just by being, not by what you do, just by your presence. As you move up that scale, up to 700-800, there are beings like Mother Mira and whatever will hold with her energy something like 80 million or more human beings that are in a fearful and lower state of consciousness, just by her presence. Not by the doingness, by the beingness. And so we can see how a relatively small number on the planet, of course, form the critical mass, which is what we're all talking about, that idea of the revelations about the 144,000 is very much about critical mass, 100th monkey. It'll take a certain number. In terms of the 144,000, I will say that it is going to be enlightened, self-realized masters and lady masters, who together with that explanation of the energies I've given you of David Hawkins, you can see exponentially what energy they will hold, and how that holds the whole of the madness of the planet somehow without falling apart. So that's the magic concoction, this critical mass. We have to remember it's not a majority of humans that are required. It's not 51%. That would never work. And as for giving 99.9% of humanity complete free will and free choice when they're totally unaware, I mean, God help us is my answer to that, which is another fairly good reason why perhaps free choice and free will are limited to a very specific agenda while we are unfolding our blueprints on the planet. I'd just like to read, if I may, a very succinct couple of paragraphs that sum up this whole question of non-duality. It comes from the Heart of Awareness, the Ashtavakra Gita, a translation by Thomas Byram. It's just a couple of passages. We are all one self. The self is pure awareness. This self, this flawless awareness, is God. There is only God. Everything else is an illusion. The little self, the world, the universe. All these things arise with the thought I, that is, with the idea of separate identity. The little I invents the material world, which in our ignorance we strive hard to sustain. Forgetting our original oneness, bound tightly in our imaginary separateness, we spend our lives mastered by a specious sense of purpose and value. Endlessly constrained by our habit of individuation, the creature of preference and desire, we continually set one thing against another until the mischief and misery of choice consume us. But our true nature is pure and choiceless awareness. We are already and always fulfilled. It is easy, says Ashtavakra. You are the clear space of awareness, pure and still, in whom there is no birth, no striving, and no I.